Good evening, good evening, good evening, everyone. How are you doing today? God bless you. Uh, Tisha and I are back on Carl's Conversations as a continuation to parts one and two about the Breonna Taylor situation. We thank you for joining us again tonight. This is part three. There was so much going on last night that we decided to come back and do part three. And as you can see, our panelists are coming in. Tonight we have Timothy Wright and Cassandra Ramsey. We probably will have one more. We thank God for our guest tonight. I don't know how many of you who are on with us now had a chance to see everything that we did last night, but that conversation ended up going into places that we didn't expect it to. But this is a real hot topic. And so, what we want to do tonight is give some direction. So much came up last night. We will cover some of that stuff because there's some things we want to give voice to. But tonight, we're going to give some direction. Several people have asked, okay, so what do we do now? And so tonight, we will talk about some of that. But I want to thank my panelists for being here tonight. Everybody's so busy. And so I don't take for granted at all that you can just pop up here. But these people have something to say. Timothy Wright was with us last night in the chat. And I started to send him a link. I did forget to mention his name. He was so important to what we were doing last night. And I appreciate him. And y'all, that's my cousin, Cassandra. I remember she was just a little thing. She was the female basketball Michael Jordan of South Norfolk. And now she is a lawyer. So I want to start, Cassandra, I'm going to start with you and just ask you to address the audience as to your feelings at this point. Now, we're a few days beyond what the Kentucky Attorney General has said about the Breonna Taylor case. Some things have come out since then, including a report. And to be honest with you, I have not double checked all the sources. Maybe you all know more than I do, but there is a report, a ballistic report that's out saying that the bullet that hit the officer in the leg did not come from her Breonna Taylor's boyfriend's weapon. I'm not sure about that. But Cassandra, we'll start with you. You just give us your initial thoughts of what you think about the Breonna Taylor situation.
I think, all in all, it's a tragic situation. One that, unfortunately, though, doesn't surprise, a lot of people in our community, and the outcome of this, just doesn't surprise us. And that's really the sad part is that, nobody's really surprised. Like what happened. I mean, you're upset, we're tired of it. We want to make a change, but the fact that we've almost kind of, in a way, grown just numb to it, is what's truly just sad, and even in the midst of everything that has happened since May with George Floyd, it just still doesn't seem that we're making, truly substantial steps forward. I mean, it's good that we have people acknowledging that Black Lives Matter who hasn't done so before, but we still haven't had the substantial, tangible change that we need to see in situations like this.
Wow. Thank you for that. Mr. Wright, what are your initial thoughts?
Well, first, let me say my eyes are dilated, so I'm not trying to be cool. But on a serious note, I can agree, but I think the part of us being numb is by design. When you see certain things happen over and over and over again, the thing that comes to my mind is, I believe it was Einstein that said to do things over and over again, expect different results. It's insanity. And I think it's insanity when we expect different, but it's still overall the same happening over and over again. But I don't want to make light of the work that is being done. People like Carl and those up in Northern Virginia with their Enough movement, they're actually bringing policy, so there are changes that are being made, but I just think it's by design. I think it's by design for us to be numb. I think it's by design for us not to really feel hope because it's the same outcome. I think that it's also of note that it really doesn't matter what color the person's skin is as far as those that are in power. It really comes down to what is the power behind that face. You know, even up in Rochester, New York, we had Daniel Prude that was well before George Floyd. So I just think it's time for us to look at what's been done, seeing that we're getting the same results, and now it's time to shake it up a little bit, personally.
Thank you. That was something that we talked about last night, but I don't think that we got in depth enough, and I want to explore it with the panel that we have tonight. My son sent me a text on Wednesday afternoon after he had heard the Kentucky Attorney General state that only one of the three officers who had served the warrant would be prosecuted, and his prosecution is not for the bullets that actually hit Breonna Taylor, but for those bullets that went into the two other apartments and endangered those people. So no one has been indicted for the bullets that entered Breonna Taylor's body and killed her. And one thing that he said to me, he said, "Dad, don't take the money. If I die at the hands of the police and it's not my fault, do not settle. Do not take the money. Fight for justice for me." And I absolutely understand the sentiment of his request. And what I think that he meant, not necessarily don't sue them civilly, but don't take the money in lieu of justice, right? And I want to kind of unpack that tonight if we could. And Cassandra, once again, I'll start with you. Because one thing that I'm thinking, and you guys tell me what you think, I'm thinking that it has to be a two-pronged attack. We have to take the money because we have to financially break them. We have to break them so that, you know, the insurance company is going to have to eventually stand up. The cities cannot keep paying these lawsuits. And then we have to pursue criminal action so that outlaw police officers don't feel safe just manhandling us any kind of way. So I'm thinking along those lines. I'm trying to see where you all are in that. And so, Cassandra, I'll start with you. What do you think about taking the money?
I don't know. I kind of, subscribe to, like, I would never want to come from a place of judgment. Like, I don't judge anybody for, like, taking the money. You don't know. I kind of feel like you also don't know what you would do until you were in the situation. And there's no amount of money. I mean, you can't put a monetary value on anybody's life in any situation. And that's really kind of how I feel about the settlement point. I just don't want to, seem like I'm judging them for taking the money. Like, that's really kind of where I would leave that.
I got it. Cool. It's right. Where you at on taking the money?
Personally, I am in agreement with taking the money, but I have to look at it from a multifaceted perspective, right? First thing is the loser in that situation is really the city of Louisville, because that's their tax dollars that's going in. So from one perspective, for everyone that is always defensive of where their tax dollars go, they should actually have the mind to be like, hey, this is our money going out, so let's actually make it different so we don't have to do this again. But that's so far removed from their actual pocket that it's just like a light complaint and then it goes away. So personally, my thing is this. I have no knowledge of it, but my first question would be, does Mr. Crump get 1/3? Because if you are an attorney that's out for civil rights and justice and helping families get justice, are you putting your money where your mouth is? Or are you taking 1/3? So I have no knowledge of that, but that would be one question that I have. The next thing is, if you take the money, what do you do with the money? Since it really is community money anyway, if you can take that money and apply it to some kind of initiative or something, sure, it could be a little come up for the family, but if that was put in some kind of trust where we could actually back some politicians to get real legislation,
then is that money really lost? So I get the sentiment, because some people say that she's a sellout for taking the money, but what can be done with the money? That's really what it comes down to. But if you're going to buy big houses and Bugattis because you got to come up, then there was no point in taking the money anyway. Her life really wasn't lost in vain.
Understood. I'll tell you, I pass no judgment at all on Miss Breonna Taylor's mom or family at all. Matter of fact, I don't think 12 million was enough. My thing, the principle that I have is don't take the money in lieu of justice. Because when you talk about taking the money, that's a civil settlement. When we're talking about pursuing charges on the police, that's a criminal thing. I'm right, Madam Attorney, right? So these are two different things. I want to break them. I'm talking about not police in general. I'm talking about errant police who are being protected by errant police unions and city officials. I want to break them. And I encourage everybody who has done wrong like that, and it doesn't have to be a death. If you're mistreated, you need to be filing action, and sooner or later, the financial portion of it will break them, and the change will have to come. We have to put pressure on them from all different ways so that change will happen. Now, that's just the way I feel about it. So I pass no judgment at all. I don't blame the family at all for taking the money.
One more thing, though.
Sure. Go ahead.
Like, a settlement is supposed, you go to court, right, to seek justice. And in most instances, seeking justice is an admission of guilt. That's what somebody wants. So my thing is, understanding that the system is skewed and jacked up anyway, do I just want the admission, or do I want the admission how I feel it should come?
Mm-hmm.
So my thing is, in essence, a settlement is an admission of guilt. I just don't want to go through the legal process that actually calls me guilty. So I think in a very, maybe not satisfying way, there was an admission of guilt. So there was justice, not necessarily the justice you wanted, but there was some level of justice that was delivered. Now, how do you build upon that so we can prevent it from happening again? Because to be quite honest, as much as we would want those officers prosecuted, as much as we would want them arrested, thrown in jail, it's not going to happen. So now the justice that we really need is something that's sustainable, something that is lasting, something that's going to make a difference to prevent this from happening again. Past Breonna Taylor laws, past Daniel Prude laws, that's the justice that we really need. Because to have a one and done, that's not changing anything, and it's not preventing it from happening again.
I agree. And you're right. I do think the $12 million settlement was an admission of guilt. And I think it was a portion of the justice that's sought. But I tell you what, along with that $12 million, I just fail to believe that there will be no accountability in the city of Louisville. Somebody got to answer for them $12 million, right? So here's a question I have, and this is an open question. So where do we go from here in this particular case? And where do we go from here when it comes to the overall fight for equality, for equal protection under the law? Cassandra, I think you said it seems like, yeah, we've made progress, but man, it keeps happening. So in your words, what do you think we go from here?
I think right now, a month before the election, we cannot stress enough how important it is to vote. And right now, the attention is on the national election, but people really need to pay more attention to their local and statewide elections, because that is what profoundly affects your everyday life. You know, district attorneys, and all of those people are voted in, and you can vote them out. And you need to just pay more attention to the bills that are being proposed, the hearings that are held on those bills, the ability to call your local leaders and voice your opinion. Like, we really have to engage more that way and not allow these situations, and like I spoke to, the numb feeling that you have to make you be apathetic to the entire to voting and to social justice reform.
Right. Understood. All right, Mr. Timothy Wright, where do you think that we go from here?
I think it's easy to say vote, and I don't want to make light of it because it's very important to exercise that right, especially due to the fact that many people died for that right. And even in the year 2020, we're celebrating 100 years of suffrage for women to have that right to vote. So I'm not making light of voting, but the cynicism in me sees how we voted in mass to get a Democratic president, Senate, and House back in 2008. And we voted en masse to get a Democratic president once again, split Congress, but we still voted en masse and stuff still happens. So the question that I would have is voting enough? This isn't to discourage you from voting, but it shows that that's just the first step. Personally, I think in addition to voting, there needs to be a mass effort to organize. And I know that you all were talking about that yesterday when it comes to our economics. Because if we don't have an economic base in the community, we really are of no merit to a system that's built on capitalism. Because literally, you don't see Chinese folk getting beat in the street. You don't see that happening to Indians. You don't see it happen to Jewish people because they all have economic basis in their communities. So I just think more importantly, or equally important as voting, is the organizing in the community and together realizing that it really doesn't matter what political party it is. We have to hold whoever is in the seat accountable. That's the first step for me, because it's not enough just to vote.
Got it. Welcome, Pastor Gary Holland. The first thing we were dealing with tonight, we were talking about taking the money. We know that my son read that text last night, and that was very moving, very touching. And one thing he said is, "Dad, don't take the money." But one of the points we were making was that I was making, and Monica, I want you to know that we see your point. And just real quick to the audience, if you're on and you have something to say, please comment. We want you to comment. We want you to ask questions. We want you to be involved. But Pastor Holland, one point that I was making is I don't judge the family at all. Breonna Taylor's family for taking the money. I don't think $12 million was enough. I think we have to break them financially, and then we have to pursue them criminally and hold those people criminally accountable just as much as we hold them fiscally accountable for what happened. So what do you think about those two areas? What about taking the money? And now that we are where we are, from here, where do you think we go?
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me on, Carl and Tisha. Glad to be here. Good to see a brother out there with the shades on. You know, it made me think about that song from the 80s. I wear my sunglasses at night. Cool. So, but regarding taking the money, I mean, hey, you know, at the end of the day, you know, take the money. It doesn't take away from Breonna, her life and what she meant to them, you know, et cetera. You know, take the money. I do think that I didn't see it myself, but I do think that I heard that the family said after they accepted the money that they were still going to pursue justice, maybe civil charges, et cetera. So I was glad to hear that. But I personally have no issue with them taking the money. But I do think that what's very important is exactly what, you know, our brother said. You know, we have to figure out a way to establish real economic power or a real economic base in the Black community. And we all know it goes back, you know, hundreds of years as to why we can't work together effectively, consistently across our community. We can look at a lot of other nationalities and cultures, and it's embedded in their culture to work together, to go into business together, to live together until you know, everybody's able to go out and pay for their own place, and to let the elders stay with them, you know, so they're not in homes and depleting reserves of the family. I mean, many cultures have that sort of behavior built in. and we often don't. I've been into business with lots of people of our, Black people and brown people, and unfortunately, it always kind of ends with drama and just silliness, and it's unfortunate, and it's a behavior that we have to figure out a way to combat and overcome, because we have so much spending power, we have so much economic power in the Black community, in the Black church, specifically billions and billions per year. The Black church collects, and not to say that we should tell any church what to do with their money, but I do think the Black church, is certainly in a position to help drive some unity and some consistency across our economic practices. We have to do a better job there, and that's when we begin to influence politicians more effectively, when we have financial resources, and we can make decisions, and we can make demands, and we can support politicians to really get people out of their seats and not just talk about it. But one of the biggest challenges I think we've had as a community for an awful long time, and I still see it today, is that we struggle to really establish that economic base that we need. And that's one of the key ingredients, I think, to really affect and change that lasts, and change that's sustainable, and change that addresses the real issues in our community with schools and housing and all the different underlying issues that really cause the crime and cause a lot of the problems we have. But until we can get beyond not being able to work together to establish that economic base that we need, we're going to continue to have all kinds of problems, because our voices really won't be heard as clearly as they ought to.
I appreciate that. I do want to deal with a question and concern from Monica in the audience. By the way, she was part of the panel on part 1 on Saturday evening. She's saying, a life has been lost, and it's sad that this has become almost normal. We're no less hurt when we hear it, but the surprise is gone. We're not surprised. Matter of fact, I think that we expect it. I remember my wife and I talking about the George Floyd thing. Of course, we were deeply hurt, but we both conceded, oh, this is going to happen again. It's no doubt about it. And then Monica's asking, where's the accountability, right? And I think she's talking about when we talk about taking the money and only one of the 3 cops has been charged. What happens in these cases with accountability when we don't feel like we've gotten justice, and how is it that this has become normal? And I'm asking that as an open question. If one of you want to jump on that, I'm all ears.
Yeah, I think I'll jump in since I was late anyway. I think, unfortunately, I don't think that we have the authority, the capacity to really hold people accountable. We can't lock people up. We can't lock these officers up that do these sorts of things. We can't go out and employ vigilantism. We can't go out here and right the wrongs ourselves. There has to be, fundamental change, but the change won't happen, I think, until we come to a place of really people acknowledging the disparities that exist in criminal justice, the disparities that exist with, how excessive force and violence is used against people of color. Disparities exist in terms of how officers get off when they take a Black or brown life versus the guy that shot the lady. He was a cop in the car with another cop in Minneapolis, I think. And the lady ran to the car or something, and he shot her. He shot over his partner and shot her. But she kind of ran at the car, and he was nervous and he killed her. He was Middle Eastern, I think. He was a Black guy. He's in jail now. He's in jail. He's not getting out of jail anytime soon. He was a police officer, in the car with another police officer, but justice found him. But she was a white woman, was killed, and it was unfair and it was unnecessary, but he went to jail. The Breonna Taylor guys did not go to jail, and so many other officers have not gone to jail. But until we acknowledge those, not just us, until our society acknowledges the disparities, discrepancies, and says, what, this isn't right. Until we come to that reckoning, I hate to be a negative, a party poop or a Debbie Downer, but I just don't see how real change can happen until we really come to the place where everybody begins to acknowledge, or a leader emerges at the national level that really helps people to come together and acknowledge that, come on now, this is not fair. The hypocrisy is ridiculous, and let's do something about it. But there has to be something that causes that reckoning before law enforcement reform and all these other issues, I think, begin to really take place. The change can take place, change that really lasts.
I think that a lot of what, in order to get that reckoning or acknowledgement, reform has to be made to education and what we're taught and when we're taught it. And so a lot of one change that has come out since um, the Black Lives Matter reemerged this summer is some universities have added courses um, focusing on systemic racism and challenges for the Black community. And until we have more of that and more people who may go all of their formative years without being in the most diverse environments, without that, they don't have the opportunity to learn various points of view and various experiences. So when they hear something like this happen, or somebody has a person of color has a encounter with the police that ends up either in death or just in police brutality, they, from looking at life through their lens, can't see what we see,
Right.
And
True.
so until we do a better job of educating each other on our experiences in this country, I don't see how that reckoning will ever come.
Wow. Wow.
If I can chime in there, why that's important, Cassandra, and that's very, very relevant, very powerful, because we see how your president has actually released made some changes where you can't have bias training, in the federal government agencies, and he extended that to contractors. Can't offer bias training, or they risk losing millions and tens and hundreds of millions of dollars worth of contracts. So education is key, and I think he highlights the value of that education and the awareness training by making it illegal in the federal government. So very, very good point.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, one of the things that I would like to say as far as how I think that we can begin to change is, and I would agree with what Sandra is saying, is that you have to change the education portion. I think that, like if you're in an inner city, it should be a certain percentage where you may have white teachers, a certain percentage that are Black teachers, a certain percentage that are Asian teachers. That way you have a diverse group. So there's interaction within the schools for presentations by way of teachers that also represent the population of the students. As far as the police department, I think, and this is just my personal opinion, if you're required to live in the county in which you are a police officer in, I think that makes all the difference, because if it's your neighborhood that you stay there, you want everybody to know that a police officer stays here. They get to build a relationship with you and rapport, and it's not just necessarily over policing the ghetto or the poor neighborhoods, because you're constantly arresting the same people. If you take the time to know people and what their situations are and not be so quick to judgment to say, there are situations where you may have somebody in the inner city where they have committed some crimes, or somebody has stole something. And again, stealing is not right. But if you see a little kid that's 13, 14 years old, and you have an understanding as to why they're stealing, and it may be because he's stealing to make sure that he and his siblings have something to eat, I think that's something different than, yes, stealing is wrong, but I think that's a different set of circumstances. You're trying to survive to eat versus somebody that, I want the latest and greatest jeans or the tennis shoes. So you have to look at the dynamics of why somebody does what it is that they do. And then, going back to the education, you have to have teachers that are willing to teach these kids, understanding that there are special circumstances. And so oftentimes, you can say, oh, well, this little kid always misbehaves. If it's a teacher that gives that child the extra attention and has an understanding why a child is responding a certain way, if you go back and look at it, you might see that mom is working 3 jobs to keep ahead, a house over over their head, and she may not be able to afford the food, or is so many different scenarios. I think most of the time people just look at what the situation is and not looking at the actions behind or why somebody does what it is that they do. Going back to the police department, this is, you know, maybe a dream. You know, say for example, all of the individuals that have been shot, that there have to be some type of report. What was the situation? Why, you know, how did you go about trying to, I know some people are trained to kill it, and I think it's different in the military when you're talking about a war zone, but somebody that's out in the street, if they stole something, you don't shoot them center mass, you might shoot them in the leg to, or use a stun gun to obtain somebody. So if somebody has to, or police officers have to give an account for all of the individuals that have been shot, all of the individuals that have been killed, and then you look at all of the information as far as the police officers, and before, I'm just saying hypothetically, if you are the mayor, though the mayor and the individuals have to give an account to what the situation is, to maybe give some accountability. It's not just on the police officer, but it's also the mayor, and that determines on whether you're going to get reelected and what is it that you're trying to do in-house for that particular police department. Now, that might be a pipe dream, but I'm just thinking of outside the box, the different ways to address different things.
Mr. Wright, you had something to say?
There's one piece I wanted to add about education, and this is coming from a high school educator. And I know education, personally, feel education has its own share of problems. Any part from.
Hey, bro, your connection is kind of jammed up. You might be in a bad spot. How about now?
I can hear you.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. You better now.
What I was saying was, as a high school educator, when I hear like change education and fix education to do, I don't feel that education can solve the problem in and of itself, because education is very much a part of the problem. And it has its own share of problems. Because like I can agree as far as, you know, having representation, you know, to match student population or diversity, things of that nature. But when I think of what really educates the population, it's not the schools, it's the media. When you have a media that takes something out of the narrative, that's when it becomes numb. That's when we can kind of lose sight of it. Nobody's talking about, what is his name, Oscar Grant anymore. Nobody's talking about Mike Brown. Nobody's talking about these individuals because it's falling out of the news media. So my thing is, ultimately, the Black community is dependent on the systems of the majority or of said structure that puts us at a disadvantage. So to depend on that system to rectify it for our behalf or on our behalf, I just think that's the pipe dream. We need to do a better job when it comes to our media and actually getting information out. That to me is really the first floor before you can even get to education, because the masses are driven by the media. And like, even when it came to the NBA, I don't know if I brought this up on this platform or not. You had a whole lot of people that were upset and they wanted to boycott. And it was President Barack Obama that came in and told the guys, y'all just need to go ahead and play. So you had young people that were charged up, ready to go to make a difference, but then their wings are clipped. So like I said, it really comes back to the media. And that really drives a whole lot more than what's taught in schools, personally. That's how I feel.
And I can agree to the media point. The media is very important and influential in what it put out. But until we're, as a country, is ready to address and actually deal with the reality of racism and everything in this country, none of it's going to matter, because you can look at Fox News and get a perspective. You can look at MSNBC and get a perspective, CNN and get a perspective. And the problem with that is, if you only want to hear what you think, you're only going to consume the network that tells you what you want to believe. So until we are able to somehow, as a society, be forced to address other people's points of view, and, you know, not necessarily agree, but at least respect other people's points of view, and, you know, try to find some level of empathy, I don't know, you know, how we're, you know, to I think the initial question, like move forward, and to Gary's point about having a reckoning. Like, I don't know how we get there without those things happening.
You know, you know what? I hear what you're saying to me about media. I agree 100%. I do think education is needed. I don't think there's any silver bullet for the problems we're facing in this country. I think it's going to be a multi-pronged approach is needed. Education is needed. Media is needed. And the question I have for the panelists, we always say, you know, I tell people all the time, if all you look at is CNN, you ain't right. If all you look at is Fox, you ain't right. You know, you have to be diverse in what you consume. But I ask people too that say, you know what, it's the media, it's the media. I say, name 3 black media outlets that you listen to. Name 5.
You can't.
You know, but they're out there. People just don't know about it. You know, there's Blavity, there's NBC, BLK. In our area, we have PW Perspective, right? There's The Root. I mean, there's so many that are legitimate media outlets, but you don't see people posting articles from those on their Facebook. They'll post clips from Fox or CNN or the outlets that are 100% partisan or biased in their own way. They may be aligned with how you feel, but they're still biased and they're still partisan. But there are black media outlets, and I agree, Brother Wright, we don't do enough to promote them. We don't do enough to let folks know about them. So I think is one thing to say we need to do something about the media. It's another thing to say we need to support our own media outlets to exist, to make sure they can live and sustain and grow and hire better reporters and invest in their infrastructure, you know, to release new podcasts and new shows and all of that sort of thing. That's why, what's it, Byron Allen? That's why they made it a point to shut him down. You know, they didn't want somebody to have that much reach from a media perspective that wasn't, you know, part of their club. So no, I agree with you. I do think that we should put an effort, find a way, Carl, for us to kind of vet 10 black media outlets, and let's try to do some kind of a campaign to start getting people to check them out and then listen and learn and hear news from a different perspective, you know, because I don't think we do enough of that.
Can I say something to your point, Pastor? I think in addition to that, there needs to be a change of psyche in the black community, because a lot of times we think whatever's the largest, the shiniest, most times it's going to be white. That's the best. Like, even when it comes to schools, I can't tell you how happy I am that Deion Sanders, primetime himself, decided to take on a coaching position at one of our institutions. But so often that's something that's overlooked. I want to go to the school that gets on ESPN. I want to go on whatever gets. But my thing is, if we put that much attention into our own, imagine if so many black recruits didn't even seek those types of schools out and went to our HBCUs. Imagine if LeBron James wouldn't sit down with the CNN, but would sit down with the Root. That's why I said we have more power than we realize. We don't know the power that we have. I think that's really the education that needs to take place, more than white people learning about systemic racism. My thing is, if you haven't learned it in 400 years, I'm at least going to start off with educating our community with how much we already have and the power that we have. That's the education piece that I feel is more important than somebody being empathetic to my cause, because you haven't been for the past 400 years.
Amen. I'm ready for a black media drive, brother.
I
media for everything else.
I'm gonna tell you what's the
LL Cool J tried to buy the Fox networks when Disney when they acquired. I'm trying to remember exactly what the deal was, but Disney had acquired some stations, and part of the acquisition was they had to drop some. And Ice Cube tried to get the money to buy it, and a lot of people don't even know that. Like, I do sports right, and I wrote about it at the time, you know, and they just could not beat these big companies like Charter and all of that. They just could not outbid them and get the sites.
Okay. So this is amazing, the things that y'all are talking about, right? Because one of the big things I wanted to do tonight, because it seemed like last night people were just kind of bucking, like, what do we do? Everybody was so charged up last night, right? And it's amazing because we're already talking about these things I have on my list. Number one thing I had on my list for where do we go from here? Vote, vote, vote. I wish I could say it in 19 different languages. Vote. And let me quantify that statement, right? Now, November 3rd, we have a very important election coming up. if there are any black or brown people who cannot see the importance of this election, I'm almost ready just to jump out the window. You know what I mean? But not just for the president of the United States. What's going to happen on your local scene, in your city, in your county, in your state, that's going to make the biggest difference in your life. When you're talking about criminal justice reform, police reform, inside of criminal justice reform, that's going to start at your local level. So when you're voting for the sheriff, when you're voting for the mayor, when you're voting for your council members, you need to be thinking about that. Even other influential positions. Many of you vote for a city treasurer, a commissioner of the revenue. Do you even know what they do? We have time between now and the 3rd to research. It takes some self-discipline and some intellectual curiosity to get involved. And then after November 3rd, we must jump in the process of activism and accountability. What do you want your politicians to do? Because if you think you're going to show up on the polls on November 3rd and then you have no more contact with them until the next election and you think they're going to do what they say they're going to do, you are seriously delusional. You have to be present and you have to be active. It costs you nothing to go to a city council meeting, a county board of supervisors meeting, a school board meeting. Those are elected officials also in many places. It doesn't cost you anything to go. You'll be surprised what your presence and the remarks that you can make at one of these meetings. Gary can tell you, our organizations, we show up. We have something to say. And guess what? We've been heard. Many things that we have asked, we have gotten. And I like to say this on every broadcast if I can. We have a motto up here. We will either change your mind or we will change your seat. So when it comes to that, vote, and go vote again. So is there anything that anybody on the panel wanted to say concerning the vote?
In regards to the vote, I would say check your local area to see in regards to, the elections for the president. Again, do the research to make sure that you know every 4 years that you vote for a new president. But make sure, in your city, county, when it is that you need to vote, it's imperative.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to say too is regarding voting and regarding what you said about politicians making promises and if you don't stay on them, they won't follow through. But specifically about politicians making promises, I don't know how many people are listening tonight. I don't know how many are going to listen between now and the 3rd, but I want to implore you, don't fall for Donald Trump's okie doke. Don't fall for this platinum plan and these grand promises to provide billions and billions of dollars to the Black community, to establish hundreds of thousands of new Black businesses, to reduce crime by X% in the nation's most dangerous. Don't fall for the okie doke. Donald Trump is pandering. He's saying things that will cause people to say, wow, maybe there's something to this guy. I know there are already a lot of Black folks, a lot of minorities that will vote for him and that support him and aren't ashamed of it and have their own reasons for doing so. We can vote the way we choose. This is a free country. Well, it's a free country. I'll say that. But don't fall for the okie doke. If you are opposed to him morally or whatever the reason is, if you don't like his policies or the way he handles himself, but then you see this platinum plan that he's releasing with all these grand promises for our communities. Yeah, I don't believe he's sincere. I believe his people put that together because he knows that people won't have the intellectual curiosity that Carl referred to really look into this and to really understand that for him to do that, he would be spending more money from the government than Biden ever hoped to spend with his liberal policies that he's proposing. So there's no way that Republicans are going to allow a Republican president to spend the hundreds of millions of dollars needed to act on this platinum plan that's floating all over the internet and that Teflon Don is talking about. So don't fall for the flim flam, y'all. He's just trying to tickle your ears and trying to get people to vote without thinking. Those things are not easily done, and not easily done without a whole lot of money. And one thing about conservatives, they believe in small government. They don't believe in the government investing millions and millions of dollars into what amounts to social programs. And that's what this platinum program is all about. So don't fall for that. Do your research, display that curiosity that Carl's talked about, and don't be so easily manipulated.
Amen. Hey, Brother Ray, I know you have to leave shortly, so I want to make sure you have a chance to say something before you go.
Well, I'll be able to stick around for a bit more longer.
Unless
you want to kick me off my message. I would just encourage people to go to websites like Ballotpedia, or actually go to your local city's website and go to, the elections, Commission of Elections, whatever it is, and you can actually download sample ballots, and you can actually see the names. Just be familiar with who's running, because I know when it comes to Virginia Beach politics, it's very sneaky. You just see names. You don't necessarily see a party that they represent, so you don't necessarily know where they stand. So that's at least a gateway that you can get a name and then do a little digging and a little research. But I will say that when it comes to the vote, my sincere prayer is after November 3rd, that we are not, as a community, backed into the corner of feeling as though we only have the choice between two lesser evils. Because I feel both parties pander. I feel both say whatever they can to get our vote. And then I think we're still left high and dry. And I can only say that because history largely shows that to be the case. Yes, there have been some advances. Yes, there have been some changes made. But I still say, oftentimes when something is given in the right, it's taken in the left hand. So my thing is, beyond November 3rd, I just hope that we truly make a stride to unite so that we can have a large voting bloc that can command legislation, regardless of who's in power. Because it really shouldn't matter who's in power. Our community should not be at the mercy of one party over the other. We have more power than we really think we do.
Agreed. And I want to say something right before we move off the voting. Early voting. There are many places. I know people watch this show from the four corners of the earth, right? So no matter where you are in the United States, most states do have some form of early voting. Here in Virginia, our early voting started last Friday, the 18th of September. Many of us voted right here in Stafford County. And you can go once again to your local city or county website to find out where early voting is. And I'm not talking about mail-in. I'm talking about voting in person. We voted in person. So for everybody who's concerned about mailing those ballots, and you're concerned about showing up on November 3rd because you think those lines may be out of the door, most of these localities are providing local voting, local early voting. So if you go to your municipality's website, you will see where the early voting is taking place, and you will see the hours. Here, we can vote Monday through Saturday, and there are prescribed hours. And I know in Stafford County, there are 3 places to vote. So all of your locales will be different. So please explore that. Now, for those of you who want to wait till November 3rd, hey, that's your choice. But we want to make sure that people know there are choices. And if you're going to vote by mail-in, make sure that you are ordering your ballots early as possible so you can have your mail-in ballot, fill it out, and then send it back as early as possible so that you're not stuck with having to worry about a delay and your vote not being counted, okay? And make sure you're smart on the new change in voting laws. And sometime very soon, I'm going to do another video on that one. The next thing I had on my list was, as far as where do we go from here, get involved in organizations that are working on movement issues. Somewhere where you live, no matter where that is, there is an organization that are working on the things that we're talking about. Somebody's working on criminal justice reform. Somebody's working on voting access and voter rights. Somebody's working on police reform. Somebody's working on economic empowerment. There are all kinds of things going on. The NAACP has all kinds of local branches. Here in the Stafford area, we have an organization called Stafford Black. We have enough. We have Heart for the Community. We have the National Black Council. There are so many organizations that are doing great grassroots work that don't cost you a dime to join. We want your time, your effort, and your smarts. Get involved. And I want to open up for the panel if you have any input on that, because I think that's a vital point.
Yeah, I definitely chime in on that. I think it's important, and it's good that there are so many different groups all over the country that are involved and that are trying to do the right things, because not every group is for everybody. But there is a group. There is a group out there for you, whoever you are listening. There's a grassroots group. There's an organization. There's a civic organization. There's a couple guys at the barbershop. There's a church. There's somebody that's willing to sit down with you and roll up the sleeves and try to help educate people in your community, try to help bring together business people in your community, trying to do the right things. You got to find them. You got to get out of your house. I know COVID has locked us all up, but you got to get out of the house. You got to go talk to folks. You keep your mask on if you need to. Wear 2 or 3 masks. That makes you feel better. Get out of your house and get involved. Get out of your house, talk to folks. We had an event here this past weekend where a local barber does it every year. It's called Hoop for Hope. And he wasn't going to do it because of COVID. And it's an outdoor 3-on-3 tournament. It's adults, it's kids. They have 3-point contests, all free for everybody. Free food. The prizes are nice and they're free. And he wasn't going to do it. And I hopefully one of my voices was one of the ones that encouraged him, to go ahead and do it. And he went ahead and did it. And the distancing was there. The masks were there. And it was a tremendous event and great for the community. And my prayer is nobody gets sick and nothing spreads. But that's my prayer every day. But there were a lot of connections made that day, and a lot of young people were encouraged. A lot of young brothers were able to talk to people about voting, and were able to talk to people about what's going on around the country. And they were able to kind of be encouraged and to roll up their sleeves and say, you know what, I'm going to help you out. I'm going to help you out, OG. How do I call? How do I get involved? But if we're not out there talking, if we're not out there letting ourselves know or telling people about all these organizations, then they'll never know. So we got to get out of our houses and get from behind our laptops and get out here in the community and stir some stuff up.
All right. Thank you for that. Anybody else?
I think the one grassroots organization that we often overlook is just the power of ourselves as an individual to speak to family, to speak to friends, to speak to young people. And that's something that we shouldn't take lightly. Just in my classroom, being able to ask at the beginning of the year, okay, who in here is 18? And find out a few of them are, and then just slip them a link to register to vote, because it can be done online. I think that's something that's almost as powerful, as these grassroots organizations, because for everyone, they might not necessarily feel comfortable. And I guess I'm speaking to those that may want to figure out a way that they can support. Either it's time constraints or it's their own nervousness to get connected to an organization. But just because you feel you can't get connected to something that's already formulated, don't knock the power of your singular voice. There's somebody in your family, there's a cousin, there's an aunt, there's somebody. Because truth be told, if you influence 4 or 5 people in your immediate circle to vote that otherwise wouldn't, to me, that's still a win. And I don't think we should make light of small wins, even when it comes to smaller organizations. It might not be given to you to be a part of the 5 billion man march. But hey, you can do something with a smaller group and make some impactful change in your community. So don't make light of any small groups, but don't make light of your singular voice.
Thank you for that. That was much needed. The next thing I have on my list is, where do we go from here? Hey, listen, if we get nothing else out of Breonna Taylor's death, police reform, police reform, police reform, police reform. And in the bigger picture, criminal justice reform. Petition your local politicians especially, and also your state politicians. Know who your state delegates are. Who's the state delegate for your area? Who's the state senator for your area? Who is your particular county board of supervisor for your district? Who is your city council member? Petition, show up at the meetings. You can even attend the meetings by Zoom and Facebook in most places. And you can submit questions. You can go find out their email address because their email address is public information on the local website. Email them before the meetings. Address your concerns. Find out what's going on with your local law enforcement agency. And where there are faults, demand change. That is very important. Brother Wright just talked about the power of the singular voice. Do not think that your voice is not powerful. Show up and speak up. And I'll open the floor for that. Go ahead.
And one thing that I would add with the point of criminal justice reform, take it upon yourself to familiarize yourself with what your rights are. Like learn your rights and what you can and cannot do and what the officers can and cannot do, so that if unfortunately you do have an encounter with the officer, you know what is supposed to happen. And I understand that things still may happen, but it's also power and knowledge.
That's right. And we're doing it here. There's already been one that I know of, and Gary probably can speak to this way better than me. And there's another one coming up where we have gathered local police officers and mostly young people, so that the police officers were kind of giving them, from their point of view, what happens on the stop, and giving them advice of how you should behave yourself during the stop. And that also opened the door for the young people to voice their fears and their concerns about being stopped. And I keep saying this. The reason why we have Carl's Conversations is because we're a safe place to have difficult conversations. When you have the difficult conversations, you have understanding. And through understanding, we can develop mutual respect, even if we don't always have a mutual agreement. Go ahead.
Oh, there was one point I wanted to add. And I hope I'm not taking the conversation a different way. But there was something that Mrs. Armstrong said yesterday that kind of rang with, or it touched a particular. And I saw the sincerity, understanding how it would be to lose a son, or to send that young son out to the store, or, hoping that father or that brother comes home. And I understand that all too well, because the same is said of me. I mean, if I was at my father's and I left and it's late at night and I'm 33 years old, there's still that concern because I'm young, black, and male, right? But I think there is a clarion call, personally, in the Black community, that more than ever we need to value our Black women. Because when you think Sandra Bland, you can go down the list, but for so much emphasis and attention, and I'm not making light of it, because I won't say that George Floyd was a martyr. I will say he was a catalyst that really got a lot going, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But she was too. And it was just the significance of her life was so drowned out in the media by the narrative. I just think, to me, that's almost sadder than the fact that she lost her life. That this is yet another young Black female that dies and then is so quickly lost in the news cycle. So for me, I think in addition to all that's been said, as far as what's important, I think we need to really value our Black and brown women just as much as we do the men, and don't let the narrative get lost on them.
Yes. Because one of the things that, even in me saying last night, when you had a husband and a Black son, you pray a different type of way. And I think that really rings true. But just as much as I don't want to send my son out to go to the store, I got 3 daughters that could become a Sandra Bland, a Breonna Taylor, and a Tatiana Jefferson. Unfortunately for the Black community, there is no exception to the rule, be it man, woman, boy, girl, or child. There unfortunately is no exception. And that's where it needs to change. And it needs to change within us as a community coming together, because it said, together we stand, divided we fall. And so many times we as a Black community, and I think it goes back until the slavery times where the slave master divided us and pit us against each other. We have to come together to say, it is nothing better than being somewhere in a situation to know that a Black man is going to come to your aid. But so many times that you could get the opposite response. We have to, as Black women, be protective of our Black men, our children, our family, the family structure as a whole. We have to protect it because there are so many people that do so many different things to dismantle the Black family, the wife, the father, and the children.
Amen.
Carl, if I could jump in, something Tim said, you definitely struck a nerve, and regarding our women. And there's a march in when is it? It's October 3rd. It's the Fredericksburg Black Lives Matter organization is having a march for women. And I feel however you may about the Black Lives Matter organization, but I think that this march is important. And when I saw it, I did some quick research. I want to read some of the stats I pulled up about women, and I put them in a post that I put out there in different outlets, encouraging people to show up for the march peacefully. But it's a couple of the quotes for a couple of the stats were, and these are all referenced in the post, nearly 250 women, not just Black women, women of all races, have been fatally shot by police since 2015. And then Black women, who are 13% of the female population, account for 20% of the women shot and killed and 28% of the unarmed deaths. Another stat is that a report from the National Center for Victims of Crime found that 53.8% of Black women had experienced psychological abuse, while 41.2% of Black women had experienced physical abuse. 41.2% of Black women. Most disturbingly, Black women are 2.5 times more likely to be murdered by men than white women. And this one really got me. In the overwhelming majority of these cases, 92%, the person who killed them knew their victim. 56% of these homicides were committed by a current or former intimate partner, and nearly all, 92% of these killings were intraracial, meaning that they were committed by a Black man against a Black woman. So what you said, Tim, is absolutely true. We talk a lot about, Black Lives Matter, and as Black men, we do need to really take a step back and really make sure that we're doing all we can to make sure that Black women are protected and honored and cared for, because the statistics don't lie. And I grew up in a time when domestic abuse was the thing. I was a kid in the 70s, and it wasn't nothing to see, women getting beat up, aunts, and, I saw it personally, firsthand growing up. But now we see it's gone beyond that to lives being taken, by law enforcement and even by, former boyfriends or husbands or what have you. So our women's lives do matter. And if anybody is available to go support that march, I think it's an important one, because just like you said, Sandra Bland has kind of gone away. Breonna Taylor, in a couple of months, the same thing may happen to her name, because we don't often place the same value on Black women's lives that we do on others. And it's time for us as Black people, Black men, to change that narrative, because it's hard for us to stand up and say what we say when the other side can look and say, well, hold on now, what about your women? What are you doing about your women? So that was a great point, Timothy, and I thank you for sharing that. And I do encourage those that are in the area to come out and support that march peacefully. It's a march for women. So.
That was great, because it rolls right into my next point, the 2 points. Number one, be the example that you want to see. Where do we go from here? We must be the example. Each individual, each family, each community. We need to be the walking example of success, the walking example of dignity and integrity. We need to have Christ at the center of our life. And I know that there are those watching who are not Christians. Whatever you subscribe to, just about all religions, the tenets of faith are very similar, right? Selflessness, love for your neighbor, right? These things we have to embody. And I agree with the brothers here, and I hope the two sisters who are on the panel can appreciate it. Hey, we got to look out for the sisters. Anybody know me? No, I don't like nobody messing with the women who I love. Just saying. So we have to do that. And also, this was brought up earlier. We must support Black businesses. This is important. Where do we go from now? You must support Black businesses. That goes to the economic empowerment in our community. If we help to uphold the Black businesses, we're going to continue to build Black wealth. That means we turn over dollars continually in our communities and on our business. I thank God because up here we have the Virginia Black Business Directory, which affects business all throughout Virginia. And even those businesses outside of Virginia that deliver to Virginia, you can be included too. And that fellowship is great. If you are a part of that, you're going to be supported. There's not anything that you ask for that you won't get. And the basic membership is only $10 per year for you to be listed into the Virginia Black Business Directory. So many times you can jump on your social media and say, hey, I'm looking for a Black-owned business that does this. Somebody has an answer. I think that is a huge part, us being the example of what we want to see out of ourselves and us supporting ourselves in business, you know, and not just with the businesses. We got to be supportive when it comes to our children in the educational process, whether they're your children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews. We got to be involved in the process. We need to be present at those school board meetings. And before I move on, I just want to open the microphone if anybody in the panel has anything to say about that.
So just examples of how to support Black businesses. You know, you need to open a bank account. Try to open up an account with the Black bank. You like wine? There's a Black girl wine vendor out there. There's these Black brothers who started a bourbon distillery out of Kentucky. You know, so the thing about trying to do Black, business with a Black business is that you often have to look for it. You know, like he was saying, the directory and everything, and social media, Instagram. That's where a lot of small Black businesses also advertise. So it may require an extra step to find, but please take it upon yourself to find one so that we can build more wealth and keep our dollar in our community more than 6 hours.
You hit the nail on the head. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, no, 6 hours. That's a shame. I forget what the other businesses are, but I think it's days or weeks. Days, yeah. And that's but the VABBD, for those that are listening, is an outstanding resource. You install the app on your phone, and it makes it easy to find, Black-owned businesses in just about any industry. And it's a great resource. And it's not just a business directory. They do a lot of work in the community. They just coordinated a food truck expo. And there were, 5, 6, 7, 8 food trucks that they were able to get out. There were a couple of thousand people that came out a couple of weekends ago. Every food truck sold out. It was a great bonding in the community. It was safe. Everybody was masked. I mean, it was tremendous. And they didn't even expect for the turnout to be that effective. And they have an expo coming up where they're going a business expo, and they're doing another food truck expo at the same time. So it's going to be outdoors. And, the VABBD's Black Business Expo is coming up. And if you have any desire at all to learn which businesses are out here, come to that expo. And while you're there, you can get some good food too, because some of these food trucks are from around here off the chain. I'm just telling you.
It's true.
So, but if you come out, you'll be blessed. You'll meet new business owners. I'm sure you'll, come away with some new contacts and new people to get your different products and services from. But what they do is amazing. And I know there are organizations like that in the Newport News area. I have a cousin that started something similar, and they're all over the country. But like you said, Cassandra, sometimes we got to do a little bit of extra digging to find these sorts of directories. But when you find them, take advantage of them and help our businesses are struggling now because of COVID. We should support them, and we should help them to get through. Not only do we get the services and the benefit, but they get the revenue and they get to remain afloat until things change. So definitely support these directories, support the upcoming Black Business Expo from the Virginia Black Business Directory and the Food Truck Expo that's going to happen at the same time. And they started a magazine, Virginia Black DMV magazine. You can find that online. I mean, just people, Black folks are just coming together and really trying to get information out. We're talking about media. Take a look at the Virginia Black DMV magazine. It's a great magazine, great articles, great content, professionally put together. And it's done to kind of get information out to people in a way that's not as biased as we're accustomed to seeing. So that kind of touches on something we talked about earlier. But I just wanted to highlight what they're doing and the benefit that I see, all across the state because of the efforts of just a couple of people that are determined to make a difference.
That's right. And y'all, Brother Wright had to leave us. He had another meeting to join, but we thank him for his input tonight and last night also. He wasn't on the panel last night, but he had so many comments. He should have been. Two more things I want to cover, and these are really action items for Carl's Conversations, and I do believe that Gary and a few others are going to be up with this. We want to set up a call, something quite like what we're doing tonight, with people of different mindsets, whether it be conservatives or people who don't think like us. On part 1 and part 2, Saturday and Sunday evening, on both nights, we had someone, 2 different people who chimed in who had a very different viewpoint than we do when it comes to the Breonna Taylor situation. And let me tell you, their comments, even though we disagreed with them, they were very fruitful for us because it gave us an insight on what others are thinking. And to their credit, they stayed in the conversation. Nobody was disrespectful to them or out of order, even though we were all pretty emotional. But those 2 people stayed in the conversation. And I really do believe that something that we said had an effect on them. As a matter of fact, the brother who stopped in on Saturday night, I'm going to invite him to join us on Thursday. I think that's the night we're going to shoot for trying to put this panel together to talk to some people who have a different mindset about this thing so that we can have the conversation. And I'll be sending out that invite to him either tonight or tomorrow. And I think that Pastor Gary Holland has a couple of people for us. We're going to try to get on, and we're going to put a couple of people on with them so we can sit and have a dialogue. Why do you see things the way that you see them? Why do you feel the way that you feel? Help us to understand where you're coming from and allow us to help you to understand. So continue dialogue. And we can do this on a personal level. I'm sure there are people in your workplace, people in your circle of influence, people in your family. Don't think that just because we have the same reflection of complexion, that we have the same political views or the same values. It is varied, and you don't know until you talk to people. But be courteous, be kind, be educated. Know what you're talking about. Take some time to do some research. Have some real information that you can share, because you don't want to be talking about something that you don't know what you're talking about and end up losing somebody or looking foolish. All right. So before we move on from that, anybody have anything to say about that?
Hey, I'm looking forward to Thursday. I guess I have one question. Is your better half going to be with you? Because I'm pretty sure you're going to be all right. But I'm just wondering if Mrs. Armstrong is going to be cool with some of the stuff that some of these folks are going to say.
I'm gonna let her answer that.
We'll see. The week is still young. The week is still young.
Okay, all right. I don't want you cussing. I don't want you yelling at nobody now, sister.
No, I'm always gonna keep it classy.
I'm gonna have to give her one of my happy pills.
Hey, I think that if we can pull this off, and it is, and it's something that definitely requires prayer, because if this comes off, Carl, the way you envision it, this can be very helpful to a lot of people.
Yes.
Maybe it might not be the ones that are on the call Thursday, but the ones that play it back or the ones that are listening in and commenting in. It's going to be very helpful. It's going to help some people become empathetic on both sides. I think it'll help people open their eyes on both sides. I mean, I disagree with a lot of folks. I don't like any Cowboy fan I've ever met in my life, but I can talk to them and understand that, okay, we both have a love for football.
So you don't like me? That's
Look, I said what I said.
I see that jersey in the back.
He's a Washington football team fan.
He's an anonymous fan, right?
But the key is that we got to learn how to talk to each other and learn how to just understand where people are coming from. And I think that Thursday is going to be a great platform for that. So I'm going to do all I can once we lock in the people to really, really promote that and get people to join in. I think it's going to be a blessing to a lot of folks.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, and just just to piggyback off of what you just said, Gary. My best friend and my husband always say, someone can swallow a bitter pill when you say it in love, when you say it in a way where you can take it in. You might not agree with it in the moment, but when you dissect it, take the time to digest it, you can look at it and you can agree to disagree, but you can do it respectfully. And you have an appreciation, like you said, to have the difficult conversation. No one likes to be told that they're wrong, or no one wants to be rejected. But for order for us to progress and to proceed, we have to we can't just talk amongst Black brothers and sisters. We have to get our white brothers and sisters and or our allies or foes to come together, to understand, to have a understanding and mutual respect.
Yeah.
I may not agree with everything that my white counterpart believes or agrees with, but at the same time, you can respectfully disagree.
That's right. That's right. And this last point, and I owe this to Bishop Lacey. He put this last night in the feed, and I saw it, but I kind of looked over. His request was that we set up a Zoom type meeting, maybe something like this, for politicians to see. And maybe we need to designate certain local politicians here. And Gary, I almost pulled the trigger today, but I kind of wanted to get a consensus that part 2 that we did last night. I really want to send it to a couple of the Stafford County supervisors. So listen, I want you to look at this so you can understand where we are with this thing. Maybe this will help you to see the other side. So I was going to wait for a consensus on that one, but I love what Bishop Lacey suggested. Maybe that's something we can work on, to invite a few of the politicians into a setting like this so that they can hear us, feel what we feel, hear what we're going through. And maybe it will just be listening for them. Maybe they'll have an opportunity and a will to want to say something. That one, I want to get a consensus about it, but I'm absolutely willing to do it. What do y'all think?
I concur. My thing would be, I don't think we should just limit it to Stafford. I think we should send it to the surrounding areas here, because of course, you may have somebody to look like me. There could be a Newport News, Chesapeake, Virginia Beach. Now I could be wrong. Not all Black people feel the same, but no one wants to ride down the street in fear or see a police officer and you almost have a panic attack, or you have to pull over to the side of the road because you are so anxious and you're beside yourself. And even those situations, I was talking to a girlfriend today that said, it is the most horrifying thing when you get to the point that you have to be pulled over. What do you do in the situation where you are pulled over by police, but because you're so fearful that this interaction could lead to your death and not be what a police officer potentially say you have some non-aggressive behavior, but erratic behavior. But I think they really need to have an understanding. Maybe if we could even set up a meeting with the police department as a whole. So when you see some Black people that respond a certain way, it's not that I'm trying to be disrespectful or arrogant or have an attitude. Most Black people really don't know what to do because you don't know what the outcome is. The sad but true part, you don't know if you ask a question, you're not trying to challenge authority, but you're trying to have an understanding. It's so many different ways. So I think maybe if we can even educate police officers, and not coming from an aggressive standpoint, but to simply say, can you imagine? Can you close your eyes and imagine what you would feel like if your 4-year-old son or your 4-year-old daughter, when they get to the point that they're 16, that you have to be concerned about your child getting pulled over? Do you understand what that is? And how would you feel if your wife called you traumatized, because of the fact that she simply got pulled over, or your child is in the car? You know, you have so many different scenarios. The young man that was, you know, had his kids in the car and he got shot in the back with the kids in the car. It's so much that can go wrong.
There we go.
Yeah, I think. But one thing we're doing in November, we Enough is partnered with the alumni chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi, the fraternity, and we're setting up a discussion between law enforcement and youth, and a lot of adults are going to be on there too. But it's going to be a Zoom call, and Lieutenant Deontay Diggs from Stafford, he does a lot of their diversity training. He's an African American man, and he's going to be representing law enforcement. And I'm working to have another law enforcement person on that's not black, and I just got to get the approval from the from the Kappas to allow that. But it's going to be kind of what you're talking about, another opportunity just to talk to law enforcement and to listen to them, because I have my brother-in-law is a police officer. He's been in for a long time, and he's now in internal affairs. But they have a lot to deal with too, and I don't think we can overlook what they deal with. I mean, there have been many police officers that have gone to break up a domestic dispute and have lost their lives, right in Prince William County, right in Stafford, in different places all around us. There have been police officers that have been in stores, on duty, buying a soda and been shot and killed because they're wearing their uniform. So, I mean, I'm not trying to defend police officers, but I think it's only fair for us to realize that sometimes they are on edge, especially if they're in certain parts of our community. Right. But just because they're on edge doesn't mean they have the right to just take somebody's life, right? They're in their job for a reason. They need to be trained properly. They need to know how to de-escalate. They need to know how to deal with situations. I lean more that way toward them just being on edge, but I do think we need to understand that they can be on edge sometimes, and they have a very difficult, dangerous job as well. But I think that the discussion we have coming up is going to be very helpful, and we're going to continue to have them. The question you had about inviting politicians, I think we can invite them to these calls, but they can't be panelists. I know in Stafford, if you have more than two board of supervisors, it's considered an official meeting, even if it's on Zoom. So they can't do that, because if it's an official meeting, then it has to adhere to the structure of an official meeting. So I think and you can invite whoever we want. I follow a lot of them on Facebook. I'm friends with a lot of them. So anything I post on Facebook, they see. So,
right.
So I'm hoping we can definitely invite them to a lot of the things that we're doing, or any calls you have up. But I don't think we can have them as panelists because it may violate, their procedures.
Got it. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Casey, you got anything?
I don't really have much. I think that it's a great idea to invite varying viewpoints and to try to get the politicians and everybody to come up. Maybe even get some lawyers if they're willing, some criminal law lawyers who have represented people who've had encounters, just to just provide some insights that way.
You know what, Carl? We can get the criminal justice chair for the Stafford NAACP. We can get her to join.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm gonna shoot to do this within the next 2 weeks. I'm gonna try to put this together.
Okay.
Well, listen, y'all, we're wrapping up. I really appreciate you. I really appreciate your time tonight. I appreciate Brother Wright. He had another call to get to. He was gracious. He actually gave us more time than we thought he had. So we appreciate him. As I always do, I just want to give the panelists a moment to have any final remarks. Or anything that you wanted to say that we didn't have a chance to say, I want to give you a chance to do that. And Cassandra, I'll start with you.
Just one point that Mr. Wright brought up about Deion Sanders being coaching at HBCU, and then one of the top prospects, basketball prospects, decided to go to Howard. When COVID and everything, our new normal finally comes and we're able to go to events again, we have to make it a point to go to the games to support, these players coming, these high-profile coaches coming, and that's another point to supporting black businesses and building black wealth and getting us to start to come back to HBCUs so we can grow everything that way. So,
thank you, and you're right. Thank you for letting us know that.
All right. I guess the last thing I say is Cassandra, if you're a friend of Carl's, you're a friend of mine. That out or family with Carl, your family with me. So that outweighs your allegiance to the blue and gray. So we all right. But one thing I would say to those that are listening in is that don't lose hope. Don't lose hope. If you're a believer, you've held on to your faith. You've exercised your faith through so many situations throughout your life. Exercise that same faith now. Trust God. Believe that all power is in His hands. The Bible talks about the heart of the king being in God's hands, and He'll turn it the way He wants. We have to just trust God and not forget that He is, in fact, on the throne. I don't know why things are happening the way they are. None of us do. We see through that glass half darkly. But I do believe for people of faith, I want to encourage you to hold on and to don't lose hope. And, the weeping endures for a night, but joy comes in the morning. We're in a nighttime situation right now. And a lot of folks are weeping and hurt and frustrated and afraid. I am. Amen. But I do think that joy is coming, and I'm not going to give up. And I know brothers like Carl, Cassandra, none of us are going to give up. We're going to keep on pressing, keep on doing the right things, and going to keep on until we see the harvest. And it may not come during our lifetime, but maybe in glory we'll look down and see it and realize that some of the little things we did help lead to that harvest. So just keep pressing, y'all. Don't lose hope. Don't lose faith. And just let God lead us through the tough times that we're in right now. That's really all I've had to say to close out.
Amen. How about you, sweetie?
I would have to concur with Gary to say, continue to press towards the mark. Don't give up. Don't give in. Just continue to put one foot in front of the other.
Amen. Hey, just want to reiterate, it is praying time. There's no doubt about it. Pastor Gary and I are part of a group called the Morning Hour of Prayer. Every morning at 6 a.m., 7 days a week at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, you can join us for prayer. As a matter of fact, this week I'll be leading the prayer. So on Facebook, you can find the Morning Hour of Prayer. If you can't remember that, you can go to Pastor Gary Holland's Facebook page. He broadcasts every morning. You can go to the Heart for the Community Initiative page. We broadcast the Morning Hour of Prayer every morning. And also, you can go to my personal page, Carl Armstrong on Facebook. We broadcast there too. It is a wonderful group. It is a wonderful place to come and cast your cares upon the Lord and pray with these other intercessors as we gather strength in Christ with each other. And so I encourage you, come on and join us. Every morning we do post the number on Facebook, okay? So you can dial in by phone or you can join by Facebook. But we'll appreciate to see you there. Thank you once again. You've been a tremendous audience. I thank my panel. These are always informative. This is just that Washington football fan. Now listen, I can appreciate Doug Williams. I don't care what team you root for. He did that thing in the Super Bowl, didn't he? He did that thing. All right, we appreciate your audience. And as we always tell you, until next time, may God bless you and may heaven smile upon you. Till next time, good evening.
God bless you, everybody.